I think just going back to something you mentioned earlier about collaboration, I think that's a really, I find that a fascinating one because contingent labor is is pretty well defined. It's pretty well organized. It's a pretty well solved problem generally from a technology perspective.
Mm.
A third party service provider, a kind of MSP perspective, a
Right.
managed service provider perspective, where you've got someone to come in and manage the whole thing. Those programs are pretty mature and pretty high quality. Um, when it gets into this kind of grey spend and some of the services areas, I see a lot of fragmentation. Who owns that? I mean, it's individual business users working under a threshold, going to somebody they already know. It's different categories within procurement where there can be a lot of defensive behavior, and a lot of territorial behavior. Um, that must have been pretty interesting trying to navigate that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not always easy. You gotta find common ground in a lot of ways, right? Ultimately, what's best for the company and the customer. Doesn't make sense to do this um, five ways, if you will, or and again, that's where you find examples. And I I worked hard, and I was fortunate. We had a commercial attorney that was very business minded, not just contracts and getting contracts right. He was super well connected in the company as well, and a very kind of positive yes, I'm talking about an attorney here. So I saw that and partnered, and then on the commercial side, and partnered well with um, a labor attorney who's a little bit more edgy because those are some touchy areas, obviously, but um, and then HR policies. So again, more contingent labor centric than services, but all that bleeds into services. And again, having worked with Beeline with some of the world's largest customers as well, with a lot of good compliance thinking, um, not just around uh, temporary labor, contract labor, but services labor coming in. You want to provide a safe environment with skilled people, right? Bottom line, at any company, whether they're actually working inside the doors or remotely, because you can do as much damage outside as you can do inside, I guess. So, if you take kind of some of that uh, core common ground that everybody should have, right? A safe work environment, digitally, physically, emotionally, right? Psychologically safe, all those good things. And you partner with some of the people who are there to help you do that, which again is compliance, legal, etc. You start building this little band of or team internally that are, not always agreeing, for sure, not always agreeing. So it's hard to argue with that kind of approach than it is to say, okay, well, IT sourcing or facilities sourcing, et cetera. So we want to work across lines and you try to get that common ground early with some of those team members. Um, Trying to think of an example, I think it was in facilities management. You think about facilities management and everything you got to bring in for that. Um, and funny, this started with supplier performance management and getting some alignment around that. But then not all facilities management covers all the areas you need covered. So how do you get certain suppliers to partner together across some boundaries that, from catering to physical plant management to building security to et cetera. Those are all different companies, and how do you get them to play nicely together? And even if you have the same procurement team that's trying to pull those in, how do you make sure they're delivering on what what we had across that network of suppliers was 69 KPIs, which sounds like a large number. Usually we try to stick with 6 to 12 KPIs for a particular area. But we covered so much ground there, and we had combined supplier performance meetings, and we had combined leadership in those meetings to and start to drive it from the back end, supplier performance management, to the front end on the buying side, which is where you get the buyers to work together, possibly across sourcing teams, et cetera. So hopefully there's a nugget in there for somebody, whether it's partnering more on the legal compliance side or partnering across buying teams or partnering across some of the leaders that want to see, a safe work environment delivered for, what could be thousands of people on or tens of thousands of people on a campus. And facilities management is sometimes taken for granted, and most people look at their cafeteria or their convenience store and rate it by that. But is the AC on? Are the lights on? Are the doors open when they need to be? All that good stuff. So that was one area of services procurement that we kind of tackled in a very partner mode.
Yeah, and also in terms of partnering, you mentioned about obviously partnering with suppliers. I just think it's so critical, and it really there's a bit of a circularity to this conversation because I actually think it all comes back to supplier performance management in a lot of ways. Um, and also when you're putting, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but with supplier performance management, it's not just a question of disciplining a supplier that isn't delivering or penalizing people or whatever. It's about aligning objectives for me. And
It
it
is.
seemed like that was the way you were kind of putting it across. Is that was that a fundamental part of it for you guys?
Yeah, and really looking at it, with the solutions mindset of, hey, we're all in this together. I think we all want to stay in this together. Buyers have different options, right? You don't want to use that as a big threat, but how do we make sure, they ultimately they want a supplier wants you as a client to be a reference client, right? Um, help on the new business front. And then the way to get that, I always used to say, "Hey, we're partners." I never from the small supplier, we're always partners. Hey, my name's on this, or my team's name's on this, or my company's name's on this. We want to make sure you have a chance to succeed as a supplier with us. Um, but it's a performance-based partnership. That
Yeah.
was the key. It's a performance-based partnership, right? We're not just playing here. We're not just having fun. This is a performance-based partnership. You want to get paid. We signed a contract to pay you for X. How's it going to work? And we want to be transparent, right? So no surprises. Let's open up the performance books and see how we're doing. If we're impacting how you're working, then we need to know that. And honestly, that's some of the things I work on now is that, how do we get the best out of us as a supplier and the best out of our client for what they bought. They bought a service from us, a workforce service solution. How do we get the best outcome together? And all the hats I've ever worn, right? I was a client, then I was a consultant, then I was in technology, and or back to a client, then in the technology, and now on the staffing supplier side. We've kind of seen it all, not that others haven't done that, but hopefully I bring that kind of roundtable mindset to it that says, let's circle up here, not stay in silos or rows, but circle up around the table to bring the best for our customer. And oh, by the way, there's workers involved here, whether it's services or labor, professional labor, and those people matter too. We want to try to find them meaningful work and uh, get things accomplished at the end of the day. So.